Greetings and welcome to Ghost Stories of Washington, Chapter 6, Sea Lore, Part 2. Widow Still Waits, Body Aboard, and Haunted Marketplace. The widow still waits. The sea has made more than its fair share of widows. For some of the bereaved, the grief was so devastating that they have gone on mourning even after their own death. This phenomenon is responsible for at least one haunted house in Seattle. Early in 1966, Marlise Drews and her 4 sons moved into a house that was perched atop a hill with a view of the Puget Sound that Marlis understandably described as beautiful. The family settled in easily and were thoroughly enjoyed in their new accommodations until the very early morning of June 27, 1966. At 12:20 a.m., Marlis was awakened from a deep sleep by the sound of someone calling her name. At first, Marlis thought that she must have been dreaming, but when she was fully awake, the woman realized that she could also hear someone walking up the stairs. As most mothers would, Marlis assumed that one of her sons needed her immediately and got out of bed. Curiously, she found that the boys were all in their beds, fast asleep. The only thing that seemed amiss was the door to the area of the house that included the boys' bedrooms. It was standing wide open. Marlis knew for a fact that the door had been closed when she turned in for the night. Despite the peculiarity of the situation, Marlis was not at all frightened. Quite the contrary, she reported feeling a strange sense of peacefulness. Slowly she came to the realization that whoever called her was satisfied that I had heard the call. Feeling utterly secure, Marlis Drews returned to bed and slept soundly for the balance of the night. The next morning, however, the events of the night were still on her mind. Once she had the children organized for the day, the young mother decided to phone a friend with psychic abilities. Marlis explained what had occurred in the night and waited in the silence for a few minutes. "Is there an attic in your house?" the physic inquired. "No, not really, but there is a storage area under the eaves." This was obviously the area that the psychic felt needed to be explored if they were to solve the mystery. The psychic immediately suggested that Marlis go up to that part of the house and look near the base of a rafter. "You'll find a picture there," she assured her friend. Puzzled, Marlis did precisely as her sensitive friend had advised. Making her way up through the trapdoor, she hunted through the cramped, dark area as best she was able using a handheld flashlight. After a few minutes in this unpleasant position, Marlis was about to return downstairs, thinking that her friend had been mistaken this time. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw something lying against the base of a rafter. She picked up the object and was amazed to find that it was a photo negative. Her friend had been almost completely correct when she had predicted that Marlis would find a picture. The snapshot negative could certainly be made into a picture quite easily. As soon as she was back downstairs in the daylight, Marlis held the negative up to a window. She could see a shot of a woman and 2 children. Judging from the clothing and hairstyles, the picture had been taken in the 1940s. The psychic was sure that it was the spirit of this woman that Marlis had heard. Her curiosity piqued. Marlis began making inquiries around the neighborhood. One couple who had lived in the area for more than 30 years remembered an Italian couple who had raised 2 children in the house that was now Marlise's home. The couple's daughter had married and had children of her own. When World War II broke out, the young husband joined the merchant marine. To combat the inevitable loneliness she would feel in his absence, the wife took her children and moved back to her parents' home. She and the children had just settled in on June 27th. She watched a man carrying an envelope walking purposely up the front walk. She instinctively knew what message the man was bearing even before she answered the door. Her husband's ship had been blasted by an enemy torpedo. There had been no survivors. The young woman never fully recovered from her grief. The neighbors told Marlise she lived with her parents for the rest of her life in the house that the Drews now called home. Upon hearing the story of her newly acquired house, Marlise felt reassured. The sailor's widow had undoubtedly made the sounds that Marlise had heard that night. What's more, her ghostly visitor had manifested herself on June 27th, the anniversary of the sailor's death more than 20 years earlier. Our next story, Body Aboard. Body Aboard. Hunters, Washington, located northwest of Spokane, seems like an unusual place to find the story of a ghost at sea. But that is exactly where this tale originated. Hal Browning, a resident of Hunters, was serving as a ship's plumber with the Military Sea Transportation Service in the 1950s. Throughout his career, Hal had made some good friends among sailors and other tradesmen. One of those friends was Chief Electrician James Mason, no relationship to the actor, of course. As Browning and the others aboard the USS Marine Adder set sail from Seattle on February 26, 1952, en route to Yokohama, they were saddened to hear the news that Mason had died early the previous week. The first few days out on the Adder were busy ones for Browning. The rig had just recently been recommissioned and required a great deal of work. As a result, all the tradesmen aboard were dog-tired by the end of their shift. The fourth and fifth night out, Browning was so exhausted that he had collapsed on his cot early in the evening and fell into a deep sleep. Some hours later, he awakened by the sensation that someone had sat down on the edge of his bed. He opened his eyes and was shocked to see his deceased friend James Mason sitting beside him. Browning bolted upright, surprised. As he did, the ghost stood up, glided to the middle of the room, and began to spin like a top. He whirled faster and faster and then vanished. Badly shaken by what he had seen, Browning ran to find his roommate, Clarence Albeck, and tell him what just transpired in their cabin. Albeck was not surprised to hear that their late friend's spirit had appeared, because Mason's remains, in the form of ashes, were stored with Albeck's kit. Albeck had not wanted to tell Browning for fear of upsetting his roommate, but he had volunteered to take the urn full of the dead man's ashes on his voyage in order to satisfy the electrician's final wishes, that he rest forever in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. The next day, after saying a few fitting words, Hal Browning watched as Clarence Albeck tossed Mason's urn into the wake of the USS Marine Adder. His ghost was never seen again. And in our last part for this episode is the haunted marketplace. The haunted marketplace. The ghosts haunting the ship's piers have proved to be considerably more tenacious. Every time the flesh and blood tenants in Seattle's Pike's Place Market think they have the place to themselves again, one of the ghosts make a reappearance. One shopkeeper, a man named Leon, discovered that he had seen one of the phantoms many times. He had always found the woman's demeanor to be odd. She made her way along the pier, so slowly that she almost seemed to glide, and she was always looking straight ahead. It wasn't until the apparition came into view while Leon was chatting with some friends that he found out why the woman appeared to be, well, a bit different. "There's the ghost," his companion whispered. Even without this helpful hint, Leon would probably have figured out the enigma this time. As he explained later, you could see right through her. The ghost is generally believed to be that of a woman who sold woven baskets at the pier in the early 1900s. She has appeared in most of the stories in the market at one time or another, often startling the proprietors by either walking through a wall or seemingly to evaporate right before their puzzled eyes. Another materialization that may have seen is commonly thought to be one of Chief Seattle's daughter, and no one seems to know the identity of the tall, handsome African-American man whose spirit haunts the market, while another ghost has been confidently identified as that of Arthur Goodwin, who was once the director of Pike's Place Market. Perhaps the most charming entity, though, is the ghost of the dancer. He is a well-dressed man who is extremely light on his feet and who appears in a specific area on an upper floor of the market. It is believed that his spirit dates back to the Second World War and dances that were organized at the time by Boeing workers. Not all of the ghosts in the market are seen. Store clerks frequently report hearing phantom footsteps emanating from spaces that they know to be unoccupied. Seaside venues are not the only haunted stores in converted downtown spaces. Retailers and customers at the Freight House Square in Steilacoom have reported seeing the apparition of a man dressed in clothes of a railroad worker, possibly a train conductor or a ticket agent. And at least one Freight House Square shopkeeper wondered if their store was haunted by a childlike spirit, because she would often find that small items she had used to decorate her store were rearranged in the night when she came in for work the next day. Very interesting. Hopefully you're enjoying these, and I made a mistake last episode. I said we had one more chapter after this one. That ends chapter 6. Next week will be chapter 7, and there is an 8th chapter. So we don't end on chapter 7. But we still do end the end of July. So I will be putting up before the end of the month here, probably in the next day or so, a community post to see what you would like for your new ghost stories season. All right? This is season 2. We had Ghost Stories of Yellowstone. Now we have Ghost Stories of Washington. What will be our 3rd season? I'll let you help decide which one it will be. It'll be probably between 1 to 3 or 4. It'll be a few choices, but we'll decide which one we will do next. Okay? So until then, take care, and we will see you in the next episode. Okay? Until then, take care and have a wonderful and blessed day. Bye for now.